Okay, so before we start, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through some housekeeping.
Yeah, that stuff in the league can often be like, well, if you change the rules quicker, then you.
Sorry, so one of the first things is if you could,
people are progressing, like, you know.
If you could please mute your microphones, just so that everyone can hear the presentation. And as we go through, if I could ask you to, if you have any questions as we go along, you can put these into the chat, and we'll answer them as we go through, or might keep some to answer at the end if we don't get a chance as we go through. And there'll also be time at the end of the presentation for questions. So if anything occurs to you as we're going through, please ask. And then just to let you know, as I mentioned, we're recording these sessions and we're going to make them available to you later on, so you can look at them in your own at your own pace and in your own time if there's anything else you want to go back over. So after these sessions, you should know what a system. So as I said, this is part 1 of 2 sessions. So after the 2 sessions, you should know what a systematic review is, have an awareness of the different types of review there are, be aware of the need for a systematic approach, and be able to develop and report a suitable search strategy, and be aware of the other sources of information that you'll need to use, know how to manage your results, and know how to locate the full text of the articles you want to read. So today, in today's session, we're going to be focusing on developing a question for your review, the importance of scoping searches, developing your protocol, using PRISMA. Sorry, I'm just going to go back there. Using PRISMA and developing a framework to develop, using a framework to develop your search. Okay, so what I'm going to start with is playing a video here for you. So this is the steps of a systematic review. So this video is from the Center of Evidence and Thesis in Brown University.
From a distance, the steps of a systematic review look pretty basic. To answer a question or a series of questions, you just gather all the information that exists, filter out the information that doesn't apply to your question, then combine it all together into a report about existing evidence and research gaps. But let's take a closer look. Systematic reviews follow a rigorous scientific process. It takes more than a few steps to comprehensively gather, combine, and evaluate existing evidence. First, make sure you're asking your questions in the right way. It's possible your questions are too broad. So many people have tried to answer your questions in so many ways that you'll never gather all of the evidence. Or maybe your questions are too narrow and there's no research or not enough research to synthesize. That's why the first step of a systematic review is prepare your topic. Take a quick look at the available evidence to make sure there's enough research to address your question. Then, craft a question that's clear and specific enough to help you decide what kind of studies should and shouldn't be included in your search. Once you've prepared your topic, you can go on to step 2, search for studies. Of course, you'll go to electronic databases to find published articles related to your question. But to find all of the evidence related to your questions, you might have to look in some unconventional places. Once you've searched everywhere for evidence, you can move on to step 3, screen your studies. In this step, you take a careful look at what you've gathered, removing evidence that doesn't answer your question or has research methods you want to avoid. Once you've sifted through all your evidence, it's time for step 4, extract the data. Take the evidence that's left and pull out the information that will help you answer your question. Once the data have been extracted, you will need to carefully combine and analyze what you found. This is step 5. Analyze and synthesize your evidence. If you're conducting meta-analysis, this is where you'll use statistical tools to combine your data. You'll also look at your studies to evaluate the quality of the research and check for bias. Once everything is prepared, you'll combine all of your evidence together to summarize the research that addresses your question. Now you're ready for the last step, report your findings. Once you've decided what the evidence has to say about your question, turn your conclusions into a report that describes the steps you took and what you discovered. Then share it with anyone who cares about your question. Want to answer more questions with a systematic review? Don't forget the steps. Prepare your topic, search for studies, screen studies, extract data, analyze and synthesize evidence, and report your findings. There you have it, the steps of a systematic review. Enjoy!
Okay, so that video there just went through the steps of a systematic review, giving you an overview of the process. So what is a systematic review? Well, it's a means of identifying, evaluating, and interpreting all the available research relevant to a particular research question or a topic area or a phenomenon of interest. So the individual studies that contribute to the systematic review are called primary studies, and the systematic review itself is a form of secondary study. The key elements in a systematic review are a clearly stated set of objectives with predefined eligibility criteria for the studies that are being included, an explicit reproducible methodology, a systematic search that attempts to identify all the studies that would meet the eligibility criteria, an assessment of the validity of the findings of the included studies, so that's the evaluation of the risk of bias in the studies, a systematic presentation and synthesis of the characteristics and findings of the included studies. So really, systematic reviews are designed to reduce bias, to be transparent and reproducible, and to answer one clear focus question following the predefined inclusion and exclusion criteria. So the steps in a systematic review, as the video was saying, is to get your question, develop your protocol with the inclusion-exclusion criteria, locate your studies, so that's your search, select your studies, assess the study quality, extract the data, analyze, summarize, and synthesize the relevant studies, present your results, and then interpret the results to determine the applicability of them. So this is an evidence-based pyramid, which shows you the increasing strength of the evidence as you move up from background information and expert opinion all the way up to systematic reviews and meta-analysis, which are the strongest type of evidence. The area of systematic reviews and reviews has broadened in recent years. So there's a wide range of different types of reviews that you can do, from umbrella reviews, which are reviews of systematic reviews, to state-of-art reviews, which give a state of the knowledge at the time. But whichever type of review you're doing, the searching is basically the same. So just to go into a little more depth into some of these types of reviews, a rapid review uses systematic review methodology to evaluate the existing research, but it leaves out some of the steps, so it makes it less rigorous. But it provides a quick synthesis of the evidence and is used most commonly to assist in emerging decision-making, such as around when the COVID-19 pandemic. The time frame tends to be about 5 weeks, give or take. It's a narrow focus question, and the sources may be limited due to the time constraints, but they follow transparent and reproducible search methods. Another type of review is a scoping review, and there's been a big growth in this area in recent years. So these tend to be broader in scope than a systematic review. They aim to answer broad topic focused questions. They are a preliminary assessment of the potential size and scope of the available research literature in an area. And they aim to identify the nature and extent of the research evidence available. The time frame is about 12 months, and they have a broader topic focused question, and they have a comprehensive search, but it can be limited due to the time or the scope constraints. For more information on the different types of review can be found in this LibGuide from Duke University. So one of the important things to know about a systematic review is that it's a team-based. The reason for this is to reduce bias. if there's a team of people screening the studies, and also because they can require a considerable amount of work and time to undertake. So if you're doing a review by yourself, you're not doing a systematic review. Okay, so we just have an activity here for you to do. So if you can think of where you might go to find information for a review. So that's a link to Mentimeter, and Dermot, if you wouldn't mind popping that in the chat as well. Thank you. Yes, that's in there. So if you just go there and just have a think, if you were doing your systematic review, where might you start looking for information? What might be good sources? So I'm just going to out of here. Okay, so let's have a look at where you are thinking of looking. Great, so we have databases in there. And we have the names of a few there. So PubMed, absolutely, Cochrane. Yes, absolutely, expert suggestion. More databases there, so Web of Science and CINAHL. Yeah, absolutely. You look at other articles to see what they've used. You could check the reference list there. Yeah, seminal papers, so like important papers in the area. Science Direct, grey literature, yeah, absolutely. That's a very good suggestion. To be really comprehensive, you'd include grey literature. So we've, yeah, more databases coming in there. There's a few there that they're new to me, so they're blockchain. That's great to kind of get new ideas there. So conferences, absolutely. So conferences in the grey literature from them. Eric, yeah, education, good suggestion. Yeah, and some more databases coming in there. Yes, absolutely. Reports in the area, Medline. Just give another minute, a little bit of time in case anyone else has any other suggestions where they might look. Okay, we've Google Scholar there, so you can, I suppose, we'll kind of discuss Google Scholar at a later point and kind of the limitations and there and what you have to be aware of. That's great. Okay, so these are, oh, we've got some more coming in there. Brilliant. ResearchGate. Again, you might not necessarily search. Well, you could use ResearchGate to get to get access to articles that you haven't got through in your database searching. Absolutely. That's brilliant. So that's lots of good ideas there. Okay, so I think that's it. So I'm going to just go back into the presentation. Okay, so that's brilliant. Loads of great ideas there. So then just to show you kind of some of the ideas myself and Dermot had. So peer-reviewed academic journals. So as you were saying, articles, the seminal literature, databases, and you gave a great range of the different kinds of databases that there are out there for different subject areas. So yes, PubMed, Medline, PsycInfo, Web of Science, etc. Grey literature, as you mentioned, so, and government reports and conference proceedings and research papers and white papers, so absolutely. You have what's called their snowballing and hand searching, so we'll go into that into a bit more detail later on. And absolutely, as many of you said, ask an expert in the area and they can lead you on to relevant results. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the PRISMA statement. So PRISMA stands for the Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analysis. So it's reporting guidelines for reviews. So it's an evidence-based minimum set of items for reporting and systematic reviews and meta-analysis. The aim of it is to ensure the transparent and complete reporting of systematic reviews. And so it's comprised of a 27-item checklist and a PRISMA flow diagram. You really should be consulting your PRISMA flow checklist when you're planning your review and in the planning stages to make sure that you capture all the recommended information. And there is a separate PRISMA statement for scoping reviews. So just to give you an example of what the PRISMA flow diagram looks like, so there you can see the total number of records identified through a database search, any additional records through grey literature searching, citation searching, etc. Records after you've removed the duplicates, your screening, what's excluded, what goes through for full text articles, screening, etc. So it really is the flow of information through the review, and it illustrates the number of records identified and excluded. And really it should be started once you have your final search worked out and you're ready to start doing your final search, then you should start your PRISMA flow diagram. So PRISMA-S is a new extension to the PRISMA statement, which was published in 2021. So the aim of it, well, really the point of the PRISMA-S statement is due to the importance of the search within the review process, and there's inconsistency in the reporting of search. So to try and ensure more consistent reporting of searches, PRISMA-S is a framework which helps to ensure transparency and the maximum reproducibility of the search component of reviews. So it is a checklist comprised of 16 reporting items for searching, which aim to ensure each component of the search is completely reported and reproducible. So you'd use it in conjunction with the PRISMA statement and other reporting guidelines. So just to give you an idea of some of the information that you need to report. So in terms of your information sources and methods, the databases you searched and the platform that you used, any online or print sources that you searched, so hand searched, any sources you hand searched would be included, any citation searching you did, the search strategies for each database you searched or information source, copied and pasted exactly as they're run, if you've used any limits or search filters, if you've updated the searches before publishing, and then when you're managing your results, again, the total number of records received and the deduplication process and the software used. That's all the information that needs to be reported. And there are more elements as well. That's just kind of a snapshot of some out of the list of 16 elements. So, the first step, as was mentioned, is to get your question. And this really is what your review is going to be based on, because your systematic review is based on a predefined specific research question. And that determines the focus of your systematic review. So a well-formulated question that will guide many aspects of the review process. So it'll include determining the eligibility criteria, how you're going to search for studies, how you collect data from the included studies, and how you present the findings. So when you're developing your question, you need to think about things like, is it feasible? Can you answer it with the evidence available? Is it too broad? Is there too much evidence? Is it too narrow? Will you not have enough? Is there not enough out there? Is it interesting? So as I mentioned, the systematic review process is a long process. So will it keep your interest up throughout this process? Is it novel? Does it address a gap in the knowledge? Is it ethical? What is the effect or benefit of answering your question? And is it relevant? Have you consulted with the stakeholders? And will your research inform decisions? And you also need to think about is there a particular population you're looking at? Children, adults, is there a particular problem that you're looking at? Where? Is it in a particular setting? Is it in a hospital setting, in a school setting? Is it in a particular geographical setting, in a particular part of the world? What is it that you're trying to investigate? What are the outcomes that you're looking for? When is it within a particular time period? How? So all these questions that you're asking yourself as you're formulating your question. And as you're formulating your question as well, you should be doing scoping searches. So the two kind of happen in tandem. So the first step in searching for your studies is to locate previously conducted systematic reviews in your area of interest. The point of this is to verify that your question hasn't already been answered, because systematic review is a time-intensive process. So you don't want to be spending time starting your systematic review and then realize that it's actually already been answered. To verify that there are no other review protocols registered with researchers who are already looking at the same question. So they may not have completed it, but they may be in the process of doing it. To identify related systematic reviews that you need to access to review the reference list for relevant primary studies. And also to identify what search terms have been used in these systematic reviews, because they could be useful for you when you're developing your search strategy. So there are a number of places where you can look for systematic reviews and protocols. So you have the Cochrane collaboration, which is promotes evidence-based research in healthcare. You have the Campbell Library, which maintains and disseminates systematic reviews in education, crime and justice, social welfare, and international development. You have Prospero, which is an international database of prospectively registered systematic reviews in health and social care. And these are maintained as a permanent record. You have the Open Science Framework, OSF registries, and this is an open source platform that supports collaboration and research. So you can pre-register reviews in any discipline. The protocols that are submitted, though, aren't submitted to an editorial team before they're accepted and pre-registered. And you can also search databases. So many databases have a filter that allow you to filter results by type of publication, such as systematic review. So this is possible in PubMed, and another place where you could do this is also in PsycInfo. So as well as searching for other systematic reviews, you're also doing sort of a scoping search of the literature and seeing what's out there. To see, again, is there enough literature out there? Is there too much out there? Do I need to broaden my topic, or do I need to narrow it in? And you're going to use golden articles so they're the articles that are really talking about what you want to investigate that you've previously come across. And you're going to make the most of those using the bibliography to locate relevant references. So that's going back. What did they use in their research? You're going to use a cited reference search to see who used it after publication. So that's moving forwards. And then you can look for it in a database and see what keywords were used to describe it. And again, this is going to help you when you're building your search strategy to think of keywords that you would need to use. Okay, so I'm going to now pass you on to Dermot, who is going to talk to you about getting your protocol.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. And just to remind people, if you have any questions, just put them into chat. If we're not able to answer them immediately, we'll do a roundup at the end. We are definitely leaving time in for questions. Okay, so let me just share my screen. And I'm going to be talking about one of the other important parts, particularly the starting point, is where you get your protocol. You cannot start a systematic review without developing or writing up a protocol. The protocol describes the rationale, hypothesis, research question, and plan methods of the review. It has to be developed before you before you actually get too far into the review, and is a guide used to dictate how you conduct the review itself. They should be developed in advance and ideally made publicly available and registered in some place such as Prospero or OSF, both of which Vanessa has mentioned earlier on. What would you be thinking about or reporting in your protocol? You'll talk about the types of studies that you're interested in. You'll be talking about the types of participants. So is there an age, gender? Is there a condition? Any other factors that uniquely describes them? What intervention are you planning with to do or investigating? And then what measures are you trying to measure, trying to discover or discuss? All of these need to be thought out and teased out in advance. And based upon conversations I've had with other people involved in it, try and be as explicit as possible. It's not really helpful if it's very clear in your head, but if you're not able to articulate it in both your question and in your protocol exactly what you're doing. We're including some links here for Prospero, which is sort of like one of the biggest places for healthcare. And as Vanessa pointed out, there are other sources or other venues for protocols in other areas as well. But for the Prospero, we're giving you information about what you need to, what information you need when you're submitting a protocol in Prospero. There's guidance notes and there's a video as well from Prospero explaining how to access and fill out the Prospero registration form. All of the time while you're doing everything that Vanessa was talking about, when you're doing your scoping, etc., you need to start selecting your sources. You need to make sure that you search in the right place so that you can find the information. And as we saw from the word cloud that we all filled in earlier on, one of the primary places that you'll fill in is the databases. Make sure that when you're thinking about your databases that you consider other subject areas that might be less familiar with you but are very relevant for your topic. So we see quite a lot psychology or education being part of those. And if you don't search databases in those areas, there's a possibility you could miss out on the literature. So just to highlight some of the more usual databases that are used in health would be PubMed or Medline, Embase, CINAHL, or PsycInfo. And then in social sciences, there are databases like Asia, ERIC, International, IBSS, PsycInfo, again, Social Sciences Citation Index. This is not an exhaustive list, it's just an indicative list of the database that you could be searching. We are going to be talking about grey literature more thoroughly on Thursday, but this just to give you an indication of like of some of the sources. Grey Literature Report. If you're dealing with Irish health related topics or questions, Linus is sort of the big grey literature site that is available to you, and it is very comprehensive and should be something that you should bookmark. And then there's Base Bielefeld academic search engine. There isn't unfortunately any one site or one search engine for all grey literature. So you may need to identify organizations or bodies that publish in this area to identify where you're going to look. And as I said, on Thursday, we will have more information about that. Another source of information where you can use is called hand searching. And you would have seen a image of that on the slide after the word cloud. And hand searching is really used when you're aware of certain journals that are really, really important, but they're not being indexed by the databases that you are searching. So it's totally legitimate for you to explicitly say in your protocol that you're going to hand search X or Y journals. And all it really involves is going to the table of contents and identifying those articles. And then as Vanessa mentioned, you would then be able to report those in the PRISMA flowchart as well. The key thing here is, as I hope you're identifying, it is reproducibility, it's transparency in this process. And it's really, really important as well as you're identifying your sources that you do test them out. You do try searches to figure out how they work, so that when you actually come to use the databases to run the actual search for your actual question, that you're not wondering what you do and there's no sudden surprises or you're not mystified by the interface. So do build that into part of your process as well, so nothing blows up in your face as when you're actually doing the search. And it just means that you can go through the whole process much more quickly, much more independently, and with confidence as well. Another very important part of the scoping or systematic or any review is the frameworks. And as you remember, Vanessa pointed out a couple of the more commonly used ones earlier on. She mentioned PICO, PCC, and we've given you a link so you can identify the appropriate framework for your question. The framework can be used in two ways. It can be used to help you write your question, but it can also be help you develop your search strategy and run it effectively as well. One of the most commonly used, and this is used originally in systematic reviews, is PICO. And PICO stands for Patient Intervention, Comparison, and Outcome. So when you're thinking about your question, can you identify who the patient or what the problem is? Can you identify what the intervention or exposure it is? What do you want to do to this patient, or how do you want to solve this problem? Or what is if you're doing a comparison between two different interventions, what is the second intervention? And quite often there isn't a comparison, so don't worry if you don't have it. And then what is the outcome of this intervention you're trying to investigate as well? And then when it comes to running your search, you can then build up your search strategy under those headings, and we'll talk a bit about that in a few minutes and go into more detail about that on Thursday as well. It's not the only framework that's out there. It's really important that you do pick a framework that's relevant to your question rather than trying to shoehorn your question into a framework that doesn't work. An alternative is PO, which is used for qualitative questions. So it's P is the population of the problems, E is the exposure, and O is for outcomes or themes. SPIDER is another one that's used for qualitative. The S stands for sample. The P stands for phenomenon of interest. The D is for design. Evaluation is the E, and R is research type. And as Vanessa said earlier on, we've seen a big growth in the number of scoping reviews. And as a result, we've seen this more frequently as well, which is PCC, and it's for population or participants, concept or context. I've also seen it described as Cocoa Pop, which I think is nice as well. But the frameworks are essential. So make sure you pick the right one and make sure you stick with it, particularly when you're developing things. Make sure everything aligns as you go along. And once you've got your framework and you've identified which bits fit within which element of the framework, you need to start thinking of keywords. It's really important that you have a really thorough and complete search. Remember, the objective is always to find all the literature for the information that will answer your question. So brainstorm, we use it as a source to help you think of as many keywords as possible. Look for pre-existing systematic reviews and protocols and see how they have said they're going to search, particularly completed systematic reviews, because they are supposed to fully document and report their search strategy. Remember, we talked about golden articles earlier on. Search for those articles in the databases such as Medline or PsycInfo. All those databases give consistent words to describe their content. So if you know how the database describes the article you like, you should be able to find similar articles using those keywords. And these are the kind of things you should be thinking about when you're brainstorming at the start. Are you aware of alternative vocabulary being used when talking about your topic? So you need to include all those various terms that are being used because you can't predict in advance what if all the authors are going to use a single keyword. You need to look out for words that have slightly differently spelled. This is normally American English or Irish English, but it could also be medical English as well. So words like color, labor, pediatrics. It's the same word, but it could be spelled slightly differently. And while the databases themselves are very, very powerful, they're also very literal. So if you tell it to search for color with a U, there's no guarantee it's going to search for color without a U. You can also simplify your search and achieve the same aim by identifying words or phrases that have multiple endings, and you can use a technique called truncation to get the database to search for those automatically. And the example we have here is child with an asterisk, and child with an asterisk will find you child, children, childish, and every other possible ending as well. If you're searching for words or phrases that have abbreviations or acronyms, make sure you use both. You don't know in advance. So if you're searching for University College Dublin, for example, you'd also search for UCD, just to be complete and consistent. You might need to identify other specific cases or examples, are there more general terms you might need to be aware of, etc. So we're going to have a go. We're going to give you another chance to do a bit of work at home. So we've created this little question here. Does social distancing reduce COVID-19 infection rates? So if we were to follow PICO, we have identified that our problem is COVID-19, the intervention is social distancing, and the outcome is infection rates. So Vanessa, if you wouldn't mind putting that URL into chat, and just as you did with the previous question, if you could just go there and think of any other way of describing COVID-19, any other way of describing social distancing, and think to describe or define infection rates. So I'm just going to stop the presentation, and I will go to the slide and we'll present that. So thank you very much. So the first one is up already. So COVID-19 is also coronavirus, C19, 2 meters apart, physical distancing, staying apart, thank you. COVID-19 is one word, corona, safe distance. And if you can think of anything for infection rates as well. Transmission, thank you. Distancing, contraction. Brilliant. Contagious. Incidence, brilliant. Distancing, what else is going? Contamination. R number, fantastic. Virulence. Okay, so thank you very much for that. You can keep filling it in, but I'll go back to the presentation. One of the terms we put in there, while it's technically correct, does have some unforeseen consequences. So we had corona put in. And one of the key things you have to remember is to try and be as specific as possible. So if you put corona in, there is the possibility you will find something on Mexican beers as well. So just try and see if there are any unforeseen complications. We'll go back to our presentation. So we got some of those. So I got COVID-19, 2019 nCoV disease, coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2 infection, COVID-19, social distancing, physical distance, 2 meters. I think we got all of those ourselves. And then for infection rates or transmission. But hopefully you've all seen that just in that couple of minutes that we spent thinking about that, we're in a better position to run, to develop a search strategy for this question. And that's the idea. We're trying to have as high quality, no obvious gaps missing in how you would search for this. And then this is how I would start drafting out my search strategy. I want to end up with a search strategy that I can copy and paste and run very easily in the databases. So what I do is I lay out in a Word document or a Google Docs my PICO structure, if I'm using that, my PEO structure, if I'm using that, my PCC, and then I lay my keywords out. And that was going to be the first draft of my search. And it makes it very easy to understand the logic of what I'm planning to do. So that's as far as we're going to be taking the process today. On Thursday, we'll be talking about how you can then adapt that search strategy or that draft into a fully fledged search strategy. So if you're working on a question yourself and you're around this stage, if you want to, and you're attending the session on Thursday, if you want to have your own search strategy written out in this format, and then we'll show you the next steps and you can work along with us and further develop your own search strategy. We will be sending this presentation on to you after the session, along with the link to the recording. If you want more information about the supports we have, we've got a systematic review guide on the library website. The link is at the bottom of that page. Vanessa, would you be able to put that link into chat? That'd be fantastic. And we've got the various guides and that have been written by Cochrane, etc. So those are the Bibles. So you should be checking those out as well. So, as I said, as I promised, we were going to leave you time to answer any questions. So has anybody got any questions? You can either unmute yourself or put it into chat, and Vanessa and I will try and answer any questions that you might have. And I'm going to stop sharing myself now at the moment. So